Okay, welcome everyone. Today we're going to be exploring probably one of the most fascinating and important questions of all time. We're going to be exploring the issue of free will and conversely the real reality of our lives, which is really that we don't have free will even though it appears so. And then we're going to be basically exploring why understanding this is so important to every aspect of our lives, really. Okay, before we begin, let's just start with an explanation of what we mean when we say we have free will. Basically, it means that we can decide to think whatever we want. You know, we can make choices. If we want to do something, then that's our choice, that we're doing freely without any compulsion. Okay? Now most of us don't believe that we have complete free will. Most of us believe that in some ways we have free will and in other ways we don't, and we're going to explore that also. But ultimately we're going to demonstrate that really free will is an illusion. Okay. We know things in this world really are often not as they appear. It seems like the sun is revolving around our earth, but we know that it's really the earth that revolves around the sun. It seems that our earth is motionless, we can't detect any motion, but really we're hurtling through space at millions of miles per hour. It seems that air is devoid of any substance, that it's just, there's nothing there, but we know there are atoms and particles and molecules in the air everywhere. It seems, it's amazing how much nature deceives us in the way things are, versus the way things appear. It seems like our Earth is one solid sphere, a huge sphere, but there are actually small particles called neutrinos that can actually travel. They're so small they can travel through the entire Earth without touching any matter. So this solid Earth of ours really is, has a lot of space for these neutrinos to pass through. And then conversely, we would think, something like this table is completely solid, but actually most of this table is space. It's just empty space. It simply appears as solid. So the idea is, nature really isn't the way it appears in a lot of different ways. And with the issue of free will, it's really the same case, that it appears to us that we decide what we think and do and say and feel, but all this is really determined by forces outside of our control. And probably the most important part of today will be, after we understand this, we'll see why it's so very important to our lives. Okay, before I begin to explain this, I just want to do a few quotes. All right, the first one is by a famous physicist. His name is Sir James Jeans. He was the first person to propose that matter is continually created within the universe. And in 1943, he published a book called Physics and Philosophy, and it's still in print by Dover Publications. So on page 205, Sir James Jeans writes, "Practically all modern philosophers of the first rank, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Locke, Hume, Kant, Hegel, Mill, Alexander, as well as many others, have been determinists in the sense of admitting the cogency of the arguments for determinism. Often they conceded that our apparent freedom is an illusion." Okay, now determinism here is really a term that basically says that everything is caused, and because everything is caused, that it's impossible for us to have a free will. And I'll explain that later. Okay, Einstein also made various statements about this. He said, everything is determined, the beginning as well as the end, by forces over which we have no control. It is determined for the insect as well as the star. Human beings, vegetables, or cosmic dust, we all dance to an invisible tune, a mysterious tune, intoned in the distance by an invisible piper. Okay, and I don't know if you're familiar with Stephen Hawking. He's like one of the foremost contemporary physicists of today. Einstein was a while back. So Stephen Hawking says, the initial configuration of the universe may have been chosen by God, or it may itself have been determined by the laws of science. In either case, it would seem that everything in the universe would then be determined by evolution according to the laws of science, so it is difficult to see how we can be masters of our fate. Okay, so let's get into the explanation of why free will is impossible and what what cause and effect is about. First, there's two axioms in science we have to understand. The first is that every event, everything happens within time, okay? That there is time, and everything that happens in the universe happens at a certain place in that time, at a certain moment, okay? And this includes everything. And the second part of this axiom is that time only flows in one direction. It goes from the past to the present and to the future. We never see time going backward. Okay, so basically, the way I want to explain why this means that we don't have free will, we're going to start with what I call the state of the universe time explanation. And I don't think you'll find this in most places. It's something that the basic theory of it has been explained, but it's something that I just devised to explain cause and effect in a clearer way. Okay, so this diagram shows the entire state of the universe, okay? And this is the timeline going from the past to the future. And here we are at the present. And each of these transitions represents the universe at different moments in time, okay? So this is the universe of the present. This is the universe 1 moment into the future, 2 moments into the future, 3 moments, and then this is the universe 1 moment into the past, 2 and 3. Okay, so the basic understanding here is that the present state of the universe is completely determined by the state of the universe of the moment before. Okay, now think about this. This moment, we can think about it as this moment in the universe right now. The entire universe, everything within it, is completely determined by the state of the universe the previous moment. Okay, so each moment, seeing it in terms of the future, the present, this moment is leading to the next moment, is leading to the next moment, into the future. And if we see it in terms of the past, this present moment was completely dependent on the previous moment, and then that moment was dependent on the moment before that. And see, the idea is that chain of cause and effect, because each of these transitions is a cause and effect. For example, the present is the cause of the future moment. Basically, the idea that because there is this cause and effect chain that goes backwards and forward, that means that everything that happens at one moment has been completely determined by the previous moment, and that chain goes back way before any of us were born. That's what we have to understand, that because that chain of cause and effect goes back before we were born, it's impossible for us to have really on our own, without any compelling forces, decided what we will. Okay, so let's just talk about this though now from a more personal standpoint. Everything we think, say, feel, do, is really, hinged upon this timeline and this cause and effect. Our thoughts, our feelings aren't outside of the universe. They're not outside of time. So that every thought that we have is based on the state of the universe and on things that happened in the previous moment. And again, that chain of events, of causality, goes back even before we were born. Okay, now, let's see. All right, even though there's this concept that that if we were to know everything that happens, that we could predict what might happen in the future. Now, this talk really isn't about that because of the nature of reality, we really can't know what is going to happen. It's impossible to predict. Firstly, because there's too many factors. It's kind of like predicting weather. We would have to know everything. It's impossible as subjective beings to know everything. And second, nature prohibits us from being able to know at the atomic level how particles are going to move precisely, unless we deal with probabilities, which we'll get into later. Okay, so let's see. All right, so now I want to just explain why free will is impossible with other ways that are perhaps a bit easier to understand because they relate more to experiences we're more familiar with. First of all, we're all according to psychology, we're all pleasure seekers. It's called the hedonic principle. It's the idea that we seek pleasure and we avoid pain. That's what life is about, in that sense. So, if we really had free will, we could choose totally pleasant thoughts all the time. I mean, who would choose to not have a pleasant thought if they could? So that's one way to understand that we really don't have free wills. And some of us think, well, we may have free wills in certain areas and not in others. And we'll get into that. I want to this is somewhat difficult to understand in a sense, and I want to devote a lot of time after this presentation to a discussion of this, because it's in the discussion that we're really going to flesh out the questions you might have. Okay. Also, according, science has also demonstrated that we have an unconscious. That we do some things in life not knowing at all why we do them. They come from a part of our mind that we're not aware of, that's below our level of consciousness. Naturally, if this unconscious is influencing our thoughts, then that also makes it impossible for us to have free will, because it's an influence. It's, we can never know whether what we're thinking is a result of something in our unconscious, because that always affects us. Okay, in science, there's they've tried to explain human behavior, and there's a kind of a controversy that's called the nature versus nurture debate. It's whether behavior is determined by nature, which means basically our genes, heredity, our upbringing, or if our behavior is determined by nurture. Nature is about our genes, then nurture is about our upbringing, what experiences we go through. Okay, but the interesting part of this debate is that both possibilities negate free will. If our behavior is controlled by our genes, then obviously we have no free will in that, in choosing our genes. And if it's controlled by nurture, by how we were brought up, by what we learned, by what experiences we went through, then again, we have no control over that because we don't choose our parents, we don't choose the experiences that life brings us to. Okay, another way of understanding why free will is impossible is that basically, this is also psychological. We're basically motivated by our greatest desire. We have sometimes competing desires to choose one thing over the next, to do one thing over the other. And what happens is that the greatest desire always wins, the greatest motivation. And the thing is, we can't really choose what we desire. it's like if we like chocolate ice cream, we can't decide to not like it. Or, it's the idea that our desires really aren't in our control also. Okay. Now, most 99.999% of the world does not understand or accept this. Okay, so we wanted to explore a few reasons why not. The main thing, I think, is like we say to ourselves, well, wait a minute, if we don't have free wills, then, I mean, what's the meaning of life? Why are we here? Why does anything that we do mean anything, And, all right, the answer to that is that, there's a lot of things in life we don't have control over. We don't have control over when we're born. We don't have control over when we die. There's so much that we don't have control over. And the idea is that, like, life is about pleasure. It's about enjoying ourselves with each other. It's not about having or being in control of anything, really. It's really about enjoyment. Again, some people think, well, if we don't have free will, why bother doing anything? Okay? And the answer is that we bother doing anything and everything because we're fated to. Because we're hedonic. This hedonic principle basically determines that if we want to walk across the room, we have to walk across. We have to take the steps. So we bother doing what we do, not because it's our will, but because we're fated to really seek pleasure and also to seek goodness. Okay, another reason why we don't understand this, and we haven't accepted this, even though, as you heard before, the philosophers throughout history have understood it, and the scientists have certainly understood it, is because of religion. The church, Judeo-Christianity, needs responsibility. I mean, that's what they prophesied. They prophesied that God gave us a will, and that is kind of justification for a heaven and hell. That's a justification for morality, for many of the teachings that religion espouses. Now, we're going to find out that we can be very moral, and it's very important to be very moral, even though we don't have free wills. But religion, think about it. I just wrote a piece on this. Like, half of this country believes that the first woman came from the first man, from the rib of the first man. Over half the country believes that the world was created 6,000 years ago. So you have, and the thing is, like, these same people believe that there's a heaven and hell. So they think that if they don't believe these beliefs that the church teaches, the religions teach, they risk going to hell, which means suffering eternally. And who's going to take that risk? Most people would not do that. Okay. Now I want to go into why this is so important. The reason this is so important is because when we understand that we don't have free wills, it frees us from 4 problems that our world is plagued with, really, by believing we have free will. 1, it frees us from blaming others. Okay? If we believe that we all have free will, we see somebody doing something wrong, something we consider is wrong, and we'll say they're a bad person. They're doing something wrong. It's a reflection on them. We punish them. We may go to war with them. It breeds animosity. Okay, so it separates us from each other if we think that the other person is doing something wrong out of their own free will. In the other sense, when we do something wrong, in addition to acknowledging perhaps that it was wrong, we say to ourselves, oh, that's terrible. I'm a terrible person. It breeds guilt. It makes us feel bad about ourselves. It leads us to conclude that we're bad people because we do bad things. And the third reason is that, like, these are like lesser reasons, but like what happens is a lot of times when we believe in free will and someone else does something really good, then we have like a certain kind of an envy. when really that person was really not responsible for what they did. They were just like fated to do what they did. And again, when we do something really good, then we become prideful or maybe arrogant. And if we understood that free will is impossible, that we were fated to do whatever we did, then there would be no reason or cause to feel that pride, that arrogant pride. Okay, I want to open this up to discussion because